I'm standing in Torridon in a place that I used to come on our visits back from Zambia, just to get away from everything. At least I think my parents were doing that, but I absolutely love this place, and I spent so many hours in the church that you can see behind me, Torridon Church, which I spent many an hour wrestling through various issues as an older teenager. This week I'm here because I'm absolutely shattered. I'm burnt out. I just need to spend time with God. And I thought, what better place than to come somewhere like this.
That clip was created last autumn. During that week, I was able to reflect on how God has shaped my journey in life through several phases from early childhood until now, and not in the ways that I would have wanted or chosen, although retrospectively I can now see why. I would like to share some of that journey with you now. I am grateful for my childhood in a remote village in Zambia where my parents were missionaries for 20 years. We were initially based in Chinsali, which was where KK was born. Kenneth Kaunda, whose funeral was on Wednesday past. My dad was strategic on the road to independence for Zambia, and in KK becoming the first president of Zambia. I ended up going to the Brethren Sakaji School. Being a Christian was a way of life for me from my early years. I have clear memories from an early age of having a living relationship with God, and it wasn't until I was 15 I really interacted with people who didn't think the same way as myself. You can imagine what a culture shock it was for me coming from Zambia to Scotland and starting at a rough Glasgow secondary school, having never seen TV or a telephone, not knowing what a group or a single was, hearing that Elvis had died and not even knowing who he was. God sent an angel to rescue me, and she's still my best friend. This was the second key phase of my life, the real struggle to fit into Scottish culture. My escape was our family holidays in Torridon. That was where I wrestled as to whether I really believed everything I thought I believed, or had I been indoctrinated. The book, I Dared to Call Him Father, by a Pakistani Muslim woman called Bilki Sheikh, and the Gospel of John helped me realize I did truly believe in my heart, and it was my choice. Although having a father as a pastor never lets others believe that. God moved amazingly in the church I attended in Scotland, so much so as a teenager I seemed to be the only one who didn't have a cool testimony about how I stopped getting drunk or taking drugs and sleeping around to start following God. I always remember my dad saying to me that perhaps it is actually a greater miracle being able to keep myself pure through my school and uni years than feeling like a second-class citizen for having missed out on some of life's pleasures. However, over the years, I've become more and more aware of how much I fall short of what God intended for me. I had a fairly settled phase when I started working as a doctor, got married to David. We were both really involved in numerous church activities. Life changed again when Dave and I worked in Romania for 2 years. David overseeing the construction of a therapy centre and myself overseeing the input of care by several hundred volunteers to nearly 100 severely traumatised children in one of the Romanian Cămin de Handicapats Irrecuperable, i.e. children for whom there was no hope. Despite some ups and downs, including getting thrown out of the country, I think we can say God was able to use us in that when we left, the orphanage had become recognised as an orphanage for recuperable children and had some specialised dedicated input by Romanian professionals. We also brought back Petra Kutsa, whom we had adopted from the same orphanage, aged 9. We were thus parachuted into parenthood. On my return from Romania, God also called me to work in sexual health, and over the years I have felt very clearly that this is a calling. I realise what a privilege it has been to be able to help people in particular because of all the negative stigma associated with sex and sexual health. In the early days I felt a real conflict with my Christian beliefs, but Dave told me to hang in there as somebody would be doing it, and maybe it was best it was a Christian. As the service lead For nearly 20 years, I have led the service down the lines of trying to reach out to the more vulnerable in society, and I like to think that Jesus would also have done that. As a Christian, I felt very much out on a limb in my work. Sex and sexual health is something that the church tends to avoid talking about, and rarely in a positive way, despite God creating sex to be enjoyed. As a result, I have probably wrongly avoided talking much about my work at church for fear of being judged by Christians. In a similar vein, I was really struck recently with the article about Kate Forbes and realised that as a Christian, I am also not able to freely express my views in the workplace either. But I try to show an example of compassion to those I work with, not something I have succeeded in of recent. So, what is the point of my ramblings? Well, none of this is what I would have chosen for myself. In fact, when I went into medicine, it was to go immediately to a poor resource country to give back what I had received. When we adopted Petra, I became very much aware that God had chosen me for that role because I could identify with coming to a completely different culture, not feeling like I fit in, not having any friends. However, I can never fully identify how hard it has been for her because of her many adverse childhood events. But my work in sexual health helped me to be ready for and to understand a lot of what she's been going through, and in turn that has helped me to be able to help others, especially in my work, through my work. I am on the verge of a new phase of my life, as Helen shared 2 weeks ago about how key God's timing is, even when we don't understand it. I have totally seen that in my life, and I'm really trusting Him for a couple of heavy burdens I am carrying and for the way forward. I need to keep trusting in and being faithful to God just as He has been faithful to me.